Welcome to Book Lovers Corner, it is, of course, for November, brought to you by Wairarapa Community Access, Arrow FM. Join us for the latest news, reviews and inside tracks on the world of books. I'm Gareth Rapson, and we have here Steve Lawrence, our sponsor and proud owner of Elmo's Bookshop. Our usual host, Valda Kirkwood, texted us today. She's down south, and her day, she was on a helicopter, and then on to Franz Joseph Glacier, then a walk to the lake, then a long bike ride, and probably after that shooting a deer, and just a typical day in Valda's life. She'll be back for our Book Lovers Corner's Christmas special in December, but we've got a big program, and we're going to cut straight away to Steve to tell us a little bit about the summer reading guide.
Hi Gareth, and hello to everyone. Our Elmo's Books Summer Reading Guide is going to go out in the midweek tomorrow. It was supposed to go out a couple of weeks ago, but last time I was on, I was talking about the travails of being a bookseller, or in fact any sort of retailer, this year. And we had it delayed a couple of weeks so we could try and get more of the stock in the shop. Because what sometimes happens is people, because we've been doing this thing for a while, people get it and they circle all the books they want and they come into the shop, and then I say, oh, we haven't got all those, and their little faces fall. So we're trying to avoid that as much as possible. We still haven't got everything, but even if we did, I'm not sure where we'd put it, because we seem to have a lot of stock in the shop at the minute. So this is is actually done with us in consultation with the Booksellers Association, who prepare it for a number of the independent bookshops around the country. So makes it economical for us to do it, and all we really have to do is get stock of about 120 odd titles, which ranges from fiction through poetry, through biography, and children and young adults, and cookbooks, and some other gifty lines.
Is this every bookshop is able to cut that to their own design, or so you select what you're going to stock?
The titles are picked by the booksellers in consultation with the Booksellers Association and the publishers, and a reasonable range of new and exciting titles is settled on, and the Booksellers Association produce the thing. We just tell them how many we want, and as I say, ours is due out in this week's midweek, so it's somewhat sensible that we're having this little discussion today. So
look for it in your letterbox.
Absolutely.
Now, the sort of second question I'd like to come up with, Steve, is just firstly, actually, I'd like you to cut to the Booker Prize winner, which was announced probably about 10 days ago.
Yeah.
What's the word on that?
Well, it was predicted that Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart, his first novel, would be the winner, so no one was terribly surprised. It's a pretty tough read.
Tell me, I mean, is really the idea of a young man growing up and looking after his alcoholic mother, the premise is just, I'm a little bit, I'm just feeling it here, that this is really going to find an audience.
Well, I think it will. You got to remember, it's Once Were Warriors was one of New Zealand's best-selling books. OA, which is, it's not the same, but it's analogous, I guess. It was probably the best-selling New Zealand fiction title in the last 12 months. So people are prepared to read something which is well written and either speaks to them because of their personal experience, or maybe teaches them something about other people's experiences. So, yeah, there will be an audience.
Yeah. And you can get that at Elmo's.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, look, you're right up with that. What about the rest of the short list?
That's the only one we have. As I said, people thought that would be the winner. And
yeah. Well, actually, all the titles looked a little bit challenging to me this year, and they were like a lot of debut writers, a lot of American writers. Less
Commonwealth writers than we've had up until this year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. The Now, another thing, I was in the supermarket and there was the listener looking at me, and on its banner headline at the top was their best books for 2020, and it's an edition I always look forward to. And I dare say we'll pick up some of that in the next in Book Lovers Corner in December. But magazines, tell me about magazines in Elmo's.
Well, we've never stocked magazines. A couple of reasons for that. One is we've never had enough room. If you've seen a magazine rack with, 50 or 100 titles or whatever, it takes up half the wall of a shop, and we haven't got a half wall available. Secondly, they're quite a lot of work, especially the weeklies. You got to get them in, put them on the shelf, pack them up again, do the returns, and we run the shop without a lot of staff, so it's just not something we've done. Right. Also, you can get most of the volume magazines from the supermarket or from Take Note down the road. So
sure.
It's not something I ever felt we needed to do.
Yeah.
And the ones that people come and ask for are stuff we wouldn't have had anyway.
Fair enough. Hey, but it's time for us to cut to Sue, now our correspondent in the north, our sort of Wahiki sort of ex-host of this show, who sends us selected extracts from her journal on the racy and scandalous lifestyles of the rich and famous of Wahiki Island. So far, we've just been getting her reading life, but fingers crossed for the sort of more racy stuff one day. Now,
you've got to remember she's in her early 70s.
Right.
That's a secret. But
she is connected. She just knows stuff. Now, this month, Sue is pointing us at a Scandi writer, Harkin Nessor, in particular, The Secret Life of Mr. Ruse, which was recently released. Steve, tell me about Harkin Nessor.
Well, we have The Secret Life of Mr. Ruse, and it is a good read. He, as Sue points out, is not as nasty as most. I always think with the Scandi crime writers, they spend all winter thinking up horrible ways for people to die. And there's this, everybody likes a little bit of that, but can wear a little bit thin.
She actually states that he's kind of this is a bit more sort of not so dark, a little bit more wit and charm, and Gunnar Barbarotti.
Yeah, it sounds more like he should be in Venice with the...
Exactly, with the sort of... anyway, that's obviously the part of the charm, is how did he get there? Now, her next book she pointed at was Ken Follett's latest, The Evening and the Morning. Now, this is the prequel to Pillars of the Earth. What about that?
Well, I could talk about that a bit, if you like, because as she also says, I've read it as well. She says...
No, hold on. That's
a good holiday
size
read.
Of this book
it's a big hardback, so it's not...
You're getting value for your money here?
Yeah, 800 odd pages. So this is the precursor to the Kingsbridge trilogy, which started with the Pillars of the Earth. So there were 3 big books in that series, and then this one's set at the end of the 10th century and runs over about a 9-year period. And this is really about the founding of Kingsbridge, how it got its name, which unsurprisingly relates to a bridge. The central character, if you like, is a guy called Edgar, who likes to build things. Starts off as a boat builder and then becomes a bridge builder and a builder of all sorts of things. It is a good read. It races along, and it's really a social history of the latter part of the Dark Ages, as imagined by Ken Follett. The point he makes is that no one really knows what it was like. I mean, the Normans built in stone, the Saxons built in wood. Their houses aren't there anymore. So it's a picture of a short, brutal existence with laws made up by whoever happened to be the lord of the manor at the time, doing pretty much whatever he liked, and it's makes you think that today's not a bad time to be alive.
Right, the social context of it all. I mean, that's what Follett can really deal with. I mean, he has got that nice. I mean, and he's got a huge audience for his previous books. Even his thrillers have been well received.
Oh yeah.
But these books. These are the books I think that'll be remembered. They'll be the ones that people will look back at. Still looks a fairly substantial book, but I like your comment that it rattles along.
Yeah.
And Edgar's a good protagonist, I take it. And
yeah, he seems like such a thoroughly nice chap, and in a world where no one else is.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll take with that. Yeah.
And he's he can build anything. He's clever.
The Ian Castles of his day, is that, was that...
Well, no, Ian Castle just gets other people to do stuff.
Fair enough.
Edgar's actually out there building the boat with no nails.
Right.
And making the nails, in fact.
Anyway, that's the big summer read. Another summer read that Sue's pointed out were the two Tom Bradby books, Secret Agent and Double Agent, which we've mentioned in the program before. And Sue liked their pace, and they are books that they have yet to be resolved. So there is the third book, obviously with Agent in the title, looming up on the horizon, hopefully in 2021. Sue also brought up, she had read Amor Towles.
I think that's how you say it, yeah.
Yeah, Rules of Civility. Now, his main book, The Gentleman of Moscow, is one of the great, fantastic best reads 2019, 2020, absolutely sensational. And Rules of Civility got a big tick, but very hard act to follow. I don't know if you felt like that.
Well, it was an act to proceed, because it was written first, but yeah.
Yeah, and it didn't quite get the love of The Gentleman of Moscow. Now, going up a level was Hilary Mantel's masterpieces, or mantelpieces.
Mantelpieces,
yes.
Mantelpieces, I guess.
Mantelpieces, which is very clever, and which are essays from the London Book Review from 1986 to 2020. Steve, what do you think of a book of essays? Do they sell?
There's books of essays and books of short stories. I think there's an increasing place for them, because there are a number of people who look at a 400-page, 500, 900-page novel and think, I'm never going to finish that. But something that you can digest in bits, there is a market for them. And increasingly, I think, for short stories, especially blokey ones. This is not blokey, obviously. These are more literary and over a whole range of subjects. As she talks about Robespierre and the Height Report and...
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a big Mantel fan, and it's a sort of book that would appeal to me. I probably would cherry pick my way through the book looking for topics.
Yeah, well, you don't have to start at the beginning and finish at the end.
This looks really good, eclectic and fun. Her last book was Madness of Crowds by Douglas Murray, which looks at identity politics and race and technology and lots more. Engaging and thought-provoking, says Sue. I've read this book. I was a little bit lukewarm on it. I tend to find I think you can find a lot of this stuff on the news and in magazines and on the net and social media. But having it all collected with a sort of big theme is Douglas Murray's challenge, and Sue liked it, me not so much.
I guess it depends on your political perspective to some extent. Well, I mean, what he's saying fundamentally is that we have this kind of pack mentality, which we're the cancel culture, whatever you want to call it, where there's just a downpour or an outpouring of venom against things, and that's the crowd ganging up on things which were otherwise fairly inoffensive.
Oh.
Anyway, it just depends how you look at things, Gareth.
It does, but anyway, that's kind of. Thank you, Sue, again, as always, for your ideas and notes. But it brings up the question of how much time does Sue have? Look, it's with the wine, the books, obviously the great restaurants of the coffee with the intention seekers and the glitterati of Waiheke Island.
Well, and she's also got to terrorise her grandchildren into learning how to spell, of course.
Oh, is that it is. Anyway, but I'm still happy with the sort of the buzzy, fun, grounded and confident Wairarapa. And we also have, far better bookshops than Waiheke. Now, anyway, moving on. The next thing is some short takes on books. A couple of language ones first. Now, first one here, we've got the word for today. This is from the ABC Australian radio, the language expert Rolly Sussex, who's for 20 years has presented a language program looking at words. And it's the love of words and how they've worked. And it's kind of like words like troll, which have taken on a whole new meaning, and the idea of he explains the background of it and why it's used, and then he has terms like drill down and takeaways and lawyer up, just phrases which we're all starting to use now. Some of them he's not such a big fan of, but if you like words, this is a really good book. Next one, Lost in Translation. Looking for a word, here's the idea is here, I'll read it. An illustrated compendium for untranslatable words from around the world. Now, often other languages have a great word for something we don't have in English. All right, and, like opening the book, and the book is beautifully illustrated, like sanduku, which is leaving a book unread after buying it, typically piled up together with other unread books. Sanduku. The other sort of ones that really caught my idea. Let's have a look at this. Glaswen. All right, Welsh, which literally means blue smile. A smile that is sarcastic or mocking. This book is full of words that you could incorporate for things that there is just no English equivalent. Good book, recommend it. Okay. Birds of New Zealand. Familiar with it? Did it arrive into?
I didn't get any because I thought a book of collective nouns for New Zealand birds seemed like a very slight idea when we've got lots of other books about New Zealand birds, but in fact it is doing reasonably well. Right.
It's Melissa Broadman's book on collective nouns, and it's a good Wellington story. It's a story about really how she got involved with Zealandia and the Otari, Wilton's bush area, started studying birds, decided that a lot of New Zealand birds didn't have collective nouns. So you open up any page and you get a raft of little blue penguins, a skulk of banded rails, a measurement of royal spoonbills, a cackling of red-crowned parakeets. But the big thing is it's absolutely beautifully illustrated. It actually works as an art book. They don't use photos, and often bird books don't. You can actually get a better idea with an illustration rather than a photo, which tends to hide some of the characteristics. The audience for that book, a book like this, everybody. An artist book is a resource book, but for all of us to be a little bit more conscious about bird habitats, bird books are quite a feature. There's quite a lot of them out there.
There's a beautiful book out at the moment by Matthew Dillon on bird paintings. That's like the 21st century equivalent of Buller's Birds. It's just a beautiful book. So I've got that because I thought it was better.
That sounds a more substantial book, actually.
It is. It's a little bit more expensive too, but never mind.
All right. And the last of the short takes, We Are the Weather by Jonathan Safran Foer. Foer?
I don't know.
Yeah. Saving the Planet at Breakfast. Interesting book, and actually more than interesting. Anything that's sort of going to save the planet. And this is a book about the climate change crisis, and if it's the greatest crisis ever faced by mankind, it's kind of his theory is that it's easy to feel paralysed and hopeless in the face of the crisis. It's like, what do I do? how can I impact on this?
Well, what would Greta do, is what people are saying.
Well, and what would Greta do? Well, Greta would do lots, but he argues that we have the power to change things. We try to change things within COVID. As a nation, we were able to group together and make concerted actions that actually altered things. And taking that thinking is that why not on a bigger crisis than COVID? It's a wonderful book, I reckon, and he lays out the battle to save the planet. And it's a call to action. It's his idea is that the world is a kind of factory farm, and if we all had a decision like to only eat meat at dinner time and reduce that and collapse a little bit of the factory farm business, which absolutely produces so much greenhouse emissions, and along with a lot of other things. The reviews of it, dazzling Washington Post, remarkable Financial Times, eye-opening New York Times, humane, thought-provoking, but it's kind of like the immensity of the tragedy forces us to make it into an abstraction. None of us can get our head around it. It's hard to talk about it. Jonathan talks about it in a really, really interesting way, and there's so much stuff out on this, but this is, I thought, a cogent kind of good read. Anyway, that brings us to the end of Short Takes. Now, what else do you have there, Steve? What's another?
Well, how long till we have to play your song?
We're looking at about 10 minutes. So,
okay.
But didn't something interesting come through the mail? Yeah.
Well, let me talk about The Forger and the Thief. I mean, Book Lovers Corner does not get so much correspondence we can afford to ignore it, and Valda was contacted by Kirsten McKenzie, who's written several books about her new book, The Forger and the Thief. She wondered if we wanted to interview her about it. Of course, we've got no way of doing that. But we did say, if you send us a copy, then we'll read it. So I have.
So hold that up to, what are we looking at? We are looking at, nice cover.
Yeah. So this is a crime novel. Set in Florence in 1966. Now, I went through the Goodreads site to see what people thought about it, and people have described it as historical fiction, which offends me personally because I remember 1966 pretty well, and I still think those are current events.
66, yeah, I can remember that well too. Yeah.
So there was a major flood in Florence. The Arno broke its bank and destroyed tens of thousands of precious artworks, and that's kind of the background to the book. The Arno itself is one of the major characters, and there are an awful lot of other characters in the book.
This is not her first book, is it?
No, this is her 8th book.
Her 8th. So
and it's a murder mystery.
Right.
And a lot of people like it. It's very intricate. It's got a lot of characters. To be fair, I'm a little bit ambivalent about it because I don't really like any of their characters. Some of them get murdered, and I think personally that's good. Everybody else seems to die, and I think even crime novels and murders, it all depends on you caring a little bit about who got killed and why they got killed, and hoping whoever the baddie was gets caught. So I just didn't really get those connections here.
And it's a standalone story?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. If we get a bit of time later on, and who knows whether we will, because this is a little bit freeform, a little bit later I'm going to talk about Ian Rankin's latest book, A Song for the Dark Times, and none of the characters in that are particularly lovely, but you kind of get to know them a little bit more, and I think that's the essence of any work of fiction, really. So I think Kirsten might have missed that boat here a little bit, and also some of the writing, I think, a little bit clunky. Again, if we get a little bit of time later on, I'm going to talk about first paragraphs.
Maybe we could actually let's just go straight into that now. This seems like we were on this. What actually is perhaps you could read the first paragraph.
Well, Gareth, the first paragraph of a book is the most important paragraph in the book. It all comes... If you want a bookseller to stock the book, then all we're ever really going to get a chance to do is to read the first paragraph. And if you want a book buyer to pick it up and carry on and read the first paragraph and then decide that it's a book they want to buy, or even if it's a book in the library, people are flicking through looking for what they're going to take home. If the first paragraph doesn't do it for them, then they're going to put it back on the shelf. I'll read you the first paragraph of this. Forced inside by the weather, Neda's wooden clothes rack sat like an emaciated skeleton in front of the fire. The incessant rain lashing the tiled roof didn't bother her, but the intermittent wailing of the damned sirens sent her clucking to her husband, that ugly great oaf Enzo lounging in his armchair. Now, that's not too bad, but...
It is a bit dark and stormy night, though.
Yeah, but I was a bit annoyed by emaciated skeleton. I mean, what other sort of skeleton is there?
Right. And
so, I just thought if she'd...
She drops a simile on us in the second line. That's a little... Yeah, I mean... You are right. We want to be grabbed in the first paragraph.
Yeah, rather than annoyed by a word that didn't need to be there.
Yeah.
Just sitting like a skeleton in front of the fire would have done it.
Yeah. But that leads us on, actually, to...
So what I've done, Gareth, is a little test for you.
A test? Oh, goodness.
Okay. So what I've done is I've pulled out the first paragraphs of a number of books. Your job is to try and tell me what they're from. Most of them you won't know, but you can have a crack. Okay, try me this. You know this.
I hope they go from, easy to difficult.
Yeah, they do. Okay, try this.
Shoot, number 1.
Call me Ishmael. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse, and nothing in particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world.
Herman Melville, Moby Dick.
Very good. Now, see, I think that starts that book pretty well.
Also, some of the most famous lines in American literature, but
exactly. But it
is for a good reason. Call me Ishmael is a great first sentence.
But it hooks you in. It tells you a little bit what it's about and kind of sets the scene.
Right. I hope they're all like this.
Well, you'll know this one too. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in need of a wife. However little is known, the feelings or views of such a man may be on entering a neighbourhood. This truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered as the rightful property of someone or other of their daughters.
Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, absolutely one of the great books.
But again, that tells you kind of sets the scene of it, tells you a little bit what's going on, and depending on your point of view, either annoys you enough to want to read the rest of it or intrigues you.
Now, I'm a late comer to Jane Austen, but actually now appreciate her way more than I did when I was a young reader of her. Hey, look, 2 out of 2. I'm on fire.
Okay, you'll get this one too because the answer's in the question.
Yeah, that's what we like.
It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Winston Smith, his chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the vile wind, slipped quickly through the glass doors of Victory Mansions, though not quickly enough to prevent a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. Yeah.
George Orwell's 1984, Winston Smith, I mean, Orwell is just the beacon for so many, writers and readers. And also one of the great novels.
Yeah. But also, the clock striking 13 and first. See, that's discordant. You're thinking, what the?
I know, and anything like that immediately goes, well, hold on, I have to know. This has to be resolved.
Exactly.
Tell me more.
And it's a bleak start, which is kind of how it carries on, really. Okay, you'll get this one too. It was love at first sight. The first time Yossarian saw the chaplain, he fell madly in love with him. Yossarian was in the hospital with a pain in his liver that fell just short of being jaundice. The doctors were puzzled by the fact it wasn't quite jaundice. If it became jaundice, they could treat it. If it didn't become jaundice and went away, they could discharge him. But just being short of jaundice all the time confused them.
Beautiful Joseph Heller, Catch-22, which actually was a great... did you catch the TV adaptation, which I thought was terrific as well?
Yeah.
But what a great book. And Yossarian's adventures with the military...
that first...
And it also takes you
conveys that certain degree of madness and insanity that...
Right into the heart of the story.
Yeah.
You are in it. Yep.
Now, you may not know this one.
Well, maybe we could skip that one.
You haven't got children of a certain age. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious because they just didn't hold with such nonsense.
This sounds like Harry Potter and the Deathly Hollow. Was that the...
Well, it's the Philosopher's Stone. So
the Philosopher's Stone, yeah. Okay.
So it's the
very first
paragraph of the first book.
I remember when it came out, seeing it in kind of Unity, in the walking by, and it's who was to know that this was going to become the publishing phenomenon of our life, really. And the book might have even had a cover with a racing car on it or something like that.
Flying car, I think.
Flying flying racing car or something. Picked it up. I did not know.
No.
Mind you, what a fabulous story when, her story of trying to get it published is absolutely one of the great tales. But, okay, continuing on.
Okay. Same writer, sort of. Someone bloody famous, said the hoarse voice on the end of the line. Better have died, strike. The large, unshaven man tramping through the darkness of pre-dawn with his telephone clamped to his ear grinned. It's in that ballpark.
Strike. Sounds like The Big Man or something or other.
Okay, so this is from The Silkworm by Robert Galbraith, who of course is also J.K. Rowling. The reason I included that was because it's a completely different feel, completely different start to the book. But both, I think, very good first paragraphs.
Right. And she's got her new book out. I saw that in your bookshop. Her latest.
The latest. Yeah.
And a very large book.
She does like a big book, does JK.
Right.
Okay. You may or may not know this, but the answer again is in the first line. Ove is 59. He drives a Saab. He's the kind of man who points at people he doesn't like the look of as if they were burglars and his forefinger a policeman's torch.
Now this is... Right, the name, Ove, that was the title of the book?
A Man Called Ove, yeah.
A Man Called Ove, yeah, the Swedish tale.
It's very funny.
Made into a movie?
I don't know.
I've got a feeling it is, but maybe it's not reached here, but yeah, okay.
Again, it's a good first paragraph, I think, because it kind of sums up what it's about.
Right. No, it's...
Okay, this is the first line from another of our best-selling books of all time at Elmo's Books. You probably won't get this. Oh, you might, because, again, the answer's in the question, really. The letter that would change everything arrived on a Tuesday. It was an ordinary morning in mid-April that smelled of clean washing and grass cuttings. Harold Fry sat at the breakfast table, freshly shaved in a clean shirt and tie, with a slice of toast he wasn't eating.
Harold Fry.
Yeah. You don't know that? With reading.
I'm sensing... give it to me, though.
It's The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry by Rachel Joyce. We've sold truckloads over the last 10 years.
Well, I'm making a note of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes people cry. It's really nice.
Oh, you shouldn't have added that bit. Okay. All right. It's
Okay. Now, here's a couple of first paragraphs you probably won't have heard, but the point I'm trying to make here is I think these are very well written and kind of set the scene for the book. Okay, let's try this. Marsh is not swamp. Marsh is a space of light where grass grows in water and flows into the sky. Slow-moving creeks wander, carrying the orb of the sun with them to the sea, and long-legged birds lift with unexpected grace, as though not built to fly, against a roar of 1,000 snow geese. No. Where the Crawdads Sing, Delia Owens.
Sue reviewed that.
Yeah, it's one of the best-selling books in the world in the last 24 months, I guess.
Outstanding. No, Sue gave that a great review.
Yeah,
and,
it is beautifully written, and I think that kind of gets you there.
Right. No, it works for me. And the final one?
Well, this is one that I think Sue's talked about and I've talked about. So this is a fairly new book. Still hours of dark to go when I left the house that morning. I cycled through reeking Dublin streets that were slick with rain. My short green cape kept off the worst, but my coat sleeves were soon wet through. A whiff of dung and blood as I passed a lane where livestock were waiting. A boy in a man's coat shouted something rude at me. I pedalled faster, past a motor car creeping along to eke out its petrol. You won't know that, but that's from The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue, which is one of the books that we're selling very well at the moment. And I think, again, that tells you, I think, that it's about a nurse.
Right, that's the influenza book.
It is the influenza book,
because I read an earlier book by her about the man getting to have to look after a relation and then taking him to Nice. I'm trying to think, not The Room, anyway, but that was an earlier book of hers. Yeah. I like her writing.
Yeah, she's a very good writer. And again, I think it's a good first paragraph. And if you're picking up the book and flicking through and you read that, you think, oh, I wonder where she's going.
So there you have it, first paragraphs. Anyway, time for a music break. What we're going to play is Kyle Eastwood's track Big Noise from Winoka from his album Paris Blue. Welcome back to Book Lovers Corner. Hey, now we're going to look at some novels, and we'll start with an American one, Carl Hiaasen's Squeeze Me. Now, his previous two books, Bad Monkey and Razor Girl, were bestsellers. Very, very big in America, and Hiaasen has established an audience kind of around the world. Now, this book is set against the glittering backdrop of Florida's Gold Coast, Palm Beach. It's a charity ball season with all the local luminaries, and of course, it's the base of the president and wife in their winter White House down south. It's a madcap caper. All the president's men, the Secret Service agents, the wealthy glitterati, and the wacko bad guys are savagely mocked by Hiaasen, and it's just a rollicking good adventure. He has been called the funniest writer in crime fiction, so he has a bit of cred, but funny crime fiction sometimes doesn't sort of work so well, but I would sort of rate him as kind of satirical writing, kind of at its best. It reminds me also of Dave Barry, who some of you may be familiar with, who's a columnist for the Miami Herald, who's written books, but very, very famous sort of columns that have leaked out throughout the world. Anyway, if you're looking for fun and mayhem with Angie Armstrong, who's a wildlife wrangler extraordinaire, think of Steve Irwin, but with better clothes.
And less.
It's called in to deal with the mysterious influx of huge pythons that have arrived, that have been start terrorizing the Palm Beach Gold Coast area. Pure entertainment. There's a zinger in a lot of almost in every paragraph. If you want a book that's going to make you smile, then I can recommend Squeeze Me. Anyway, our next novel, Robert Harris, the V2. Now, familiar? You would have read other Robert Harris books.
Yep.
Fatherland.
Yeah. Oh, he's written and quite some Roman stuff.
That's right.
Conclaves about the Pope.
His Cicero books, which I read reasonably, in the last year or two, Imperium, Lustum, Dictator.
Yeah, they're not particularly old, so they're last decade or so.
They're fantastic.
Yeah, he's busy.
And his Munich, he writes. He releases a book. This is a book he wrote during the lockdown. He had 14 weeks in lockdown, and at the end of it, we get, this. I mean, which is a lot more productive than me, and who just seemed to sort of swan around reading, and he was someone actually working. This is a story about 5 days at the end of the Second World War in November 1944. And its framework is factual, and over about 1,000 V2 rockets were set out and fired at London. Now,
terrifying, because no one knew where the explosions were coming from. These things went up into the stratosphere and then came straight back down again. No one could hear them coming.
2,500, 2,500 miles per hour.
Yeah, and a ton of explosive.
Yeah, and they, it's a way of. I'll talk a little bit about the book generally, but it's actually, in the heart of it, it's kind of about rockets and the fascinations of rockets. We've got two characters, Rudi Graf, who's a rocket engineer, German, and a friend of Walter von Braun, who's sort of running the rocket program for the Nazis. They're in occupied Holland. So Holland there's been D-Day, Europe is being slowly taken back, but Holland is still occupied, and in a little wee niche down on the coast, they are launching rockets at London. and they make them in Germany in a huge cabin built by slave labour, train them down at night, fire them off at the morning, hide them in the forests down on the beach, and then slide them out onto a concrete pad, and away they go. And it's like 4 minutes later from firing, they're hitting London. And our second character is Kay Cohen Walsh, who's an officer in the WAF, and she is formed. They get an idea that what they'll do is that they will get a team of 8 of these very smart sort of women who are really good mathematicians, and the plan is they fly them into Holland, and they're up the coast, and they can see the flash of the launches, which are then tracked, and then they're using slide rules and sort of mathematics, log tables, back into all that sort of stuff. They will get a report from London of where it struck, and they will work out the parabola of the point where they saw it come out, and they will have scrambled modified Spitfires with some bombs on them, who will be cruising in and come and try and take out the launch sites before they are retracted back into the forests. That's the sort of the framework of the book. And it's Robert Harris writes this sort of World War II stuff really well, but it's also the story of the development of rockets, and it's back in the day in the 20s when the German rocket scientists were playing around with this idea, and we take it for granted today. We have our own rocket site up in Mahir, and we watch satellites being launched all the time. But back in in the 1920s, 30s, there was an absolute fascination and with it. They could fly 23 miles. They went 23 miles up into the stratosphere. They killed about 2,700 citizens in London, and injured about 6,300. But they destroyed 20,000 homes, and about 580,000 were damaged. And this housing shortage was the real the biggest social problem. After when the war ended, they suddenly had this huge housing issue. Sounds like us today.
It sounds like us today. Except no one's blown ours up. They're just...
I know, and historians have treated this V2 program as one of the greatest wastes of resources by any country in a really supremely wasteful war.
Because they killed, 50 or 60,000 people building the things. And the other thing that was interesting was that the Germans used slave labour to assemble these things, and the wages of sin of death, and the hours aren't very good either. So these people were just not very good at building rockets, so they had a lot of trouble early on.
I know, there were a lot of malfunctions, right? But the Nazis fell in love with it. The idea of once they had viewed a few of them go off, they thought this was going to be the secret weapon that was going to do it. Anyway, our book plunges us into the scene, and we get this chase between these mathematicians and our scientists, and to see if they can resolve it. And so it's a little look into a little part of the war that was fought with slide rules and log tables, if people can remember such things. So there it is. Now, Robert Harris is married to Nick Hornby's sister. Now, there you go.
That's a segue, isn't it?
That is. Now, and you can actually imagine the dinner table conversation with these guys sitting around here. And this brings us into our last novel I'd like to introduce you today, Nick Hornby's Just Like You. Now, Nick Hornby, I'm a fan. I loved High Fidelity, which was made into a movie, if I remember rightly, with Jack Black and in the music shop. About a Boy, which was once again made into a movie, Hugh Grant. My probably favourite sports book, Fever Pitch. about the Arsenal football team, non-fiction. Absolute fan. Now, Steve, I'm getting the shaking of the head here.
I've never read any of them.
Yeah, no, I'm a fan. Nick Hornby is. It's kind of the. It says at the bottom here, Hornby is the poet of the everyday, and I think that in a way sums it up. There's always in his books a kind of a social issue that's at the heart of them, and there's been books on all sorts of topics. And Just Like You is no exception. It's a book about relationships in London with Lucy, university graduate, head of English at a local secondary school. She's 42. And her relationship with Joseph, who's 22, is black, works nearby, does all sorts of odd jobs. He's sort of he works in a butcher shop for a few hours. He works in a local sort of fitness centre. He's into DJing. He's into babysitting. Anyway. So we get this idea, the social issue of the idea of a relationship between people who are not matched by age, and the context is London's Brexit, and so they're right in the middle of the rock and roll of this, and how quickly we forget how disorientating Brexit was for the English.
They ain't said nothing yet.
No, and everybody is slightly unhinged by it, and changing their opinions and going back and forth. There's not a lot of plot in here. This is Mr. Dialogue. It really just hums along with terrific little insights here. Funny, sharp, very, very Brit. And the sort of Brit humour that's, at its best of all the Brits we know. They're very funny people. And this book, Hornby can capture that endlessly. He's really good at football. He's really good at music, politics, sex, and kind of the zeitgeist of the sort of life. And this book, would be, I think a lot of people would become a fan and then like to read back, because I still think it's not as good as High Fidelity or About a Boy, when he was really at his best, but it's still a very, very good read. Okay. So that's kind of my three books. What have you got there?
Well, the one I'd just like to talk about briefly, because Valda will be cross with us for being all over the place, but just not as organised as she would have liked. This is Ian Rankin's latest book, A Song for the Dark Times, which is a Rebus thriller. Rebus has been his man for 20-odd books. He was probably the original flawed policeman. And this is Rebus is retired in this book. This is the second book about him since he's been retired from the force, and it centres to some extent on his relationship with his daughter, which was always fairly fraught because he was never home. His wife left him. She's been living in a distant part of Scotland. She never sees him. Starts with him moving house and not bothering to tell her that he's moved. And then her partner, the father of his grandchild, disappears, and he goes to try and help her find him. He is, of course, dead. And there's a parallel police investigation going on with another murder in Edinburgh, and it's a intricate plot. But the distinction I was going to try and make here with this book and The Forger and the Thief is, although Rebus is not a nice man, his daughter's not been a good woman. Her relationship with her partner was, she had an affair, and none of these people are sympathetic really, but you do kind of care about them because of the way it's crafted. You don't worry about them, but you you can
There's
feel
an empathy that...
you can sort of feel their pain and understand why they're doing the things they do. So,
Are these set in like contemporary times, or is this a little bit back?
oh no, this is right now.
Right now, okay.
Yeah.
And is it standalone, or do you feel like you need to know the whole... Or, for the readers who have followed Rebus...
Well, they'll understand the characterizations better, but you could just pick up this book and read it. It makes perfect sense. He explains the backstory well enough. So, good crime writing,
Right.
I think, Ian Rankin.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a classic. I know he's got a huge fan base. Quick summary. What we've looked at.
Well, we talked about The Forger and the Thief, courtesy of Kirsten, who sent us the book. We talked about Ken Follett, The Evening and the Morning, a sort of brutal social history of the Dark Ages. And I've talked about recently Ian Rankin, Song for the Dark Times.
Right. And I looked at Nick Hornby's Just Like You, which got a pretty good tick from me. Kyle Hastings, let's get into the Winter White Palace or the White House and absolutely roast and mock a certain occupant of it down there. Robert Harris's latest V2, and a continuing body of work that's developing. And if you're a Robert Harris fan, you'll enjoy that. Time to close now. You've been listening to Wairarapa Community Access Radio with Arrow FM. You can find us on TV Freeview Channel 41 or on YouTube. And until next time, we'll see you from Book Lovers Corner.
Good night. Or afternoon, or what time is it?